This conference will now be recorded.
Why don't we do I'll do a quick roll call here, at least for the Invest in Willmar committee, okay? So, Tony Ammon. Okay. John Kono. Mary Sawatsky.
Present.
Bob Poe.
Present.
Dennis Anderson. I can see Dennis. Okay. Dennis, can you hear us? Okay. If you speak, you're gonna have to hit that mic button. Then Councilwoman Audrey Nelson.
I'm here.
Councilman Sean Muskie.
Here.
Okay, I'd like to, we can approve the meeting minutes from 4/8/2020.
Mr. Dennis, move to approve.
Second. Sean.
Second. Any questions or discussion on the minutes? That motion, if all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The approved minutes for the April 8th, 2020. Any proposed additions or deletions for this agenda this afternoon? Okay, seeing and hearing nothing, I will approve the agenda and we will move forward. On the first item on the agenda, number 1, I've got to review the City Council's decision from May 18th. And if we could get a recap, I listened to that twice. Would either council person, Audrey or Sean, would like to give us a recap of the decision? Otherwise, I can do it unless one of you guys would like to.
Matt, I would request that our city administrator do that, please.
Okay, Brian?
All right, committee members, as I understood it, there were 2 decisions that were made by the City Council. The first being the Robbins Island project, which had its plans and specifications approved at a prior City Council meeting, was authorized to proceed to plans and to bidding process, and the project was reduced in scope to remove the 2 alternate options, which were the 2 park shelters, and that the road, street, paved trails, and parking lot aspect of the $3 million project would remain. So that amounts to just under $2 million for the flat surface part of the project. And then there's an additional amount for the soft costs, which gets it realistically back up to about 82%. So that's the end result of that particular project. So we're spending 82% of the $3 million just for the asphalt and flat surface. The second decision that was made was to place the remaining architects and construction managers on hold while the Invest in Willmar and its subcommittees look at what sort of project they could piece together by utilizing, some sort of priority basis to utilize up to 67% or 2/3 of the allocation that was applied to that particular project. So, everybody can do 2/3 of whatever your project is. That's the dollars that are available that we're supposed to be shooting for. So that I think in a nutshell, this brings us to today, to kind of talk about how do we carry that forward, to the committees so that they have, an understanding of how much money is available to be spent and how much, how much each individual project has available based on what the city council had made a decision on. And just so everybody, kind of understands, I know I've had numerous conversations with Chairman Dawson on the specifics of why 2/3, comes up, or 67%, if you want to call it that. And that just simply is based upon our best calculations on the current sales tax that we received from October through March, and going through this COVID-19 time period, possibly ramping back up, potentially seeing a downturn in retail sales, which results in reduced sales tax receipts, that if you carry that out the full 13 years, you'll end up roughly with $24 million that you would have collected. And that is not enough money to pay for $30 million worth of projects. It is, however, enough to pay off $20 million worth of projects with, approximately, $3 million in interest over the 13 years. So if things get better, we'll have more money and we can maybe pick up a few projects that weren't dealt with at this point in time. We can do them a little bit later on. But if not, that's, I think, the marching orders that the city council has handed down to the committee, reflecting the anticipated sales tax revenue. The project totals were reduced by 1/3.
Councilman Nelson.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Councilmember Metzke. I thought the motion regarding the architects was really short, and while we had a conversation about all the things that Brian talked about, I just was curious if Councilmember Metzke was agreeing that to all of the other things that Brian indicated. It was my understanding from the motion that the architects were simply put on hold, and so I'm just asking for clarification from Councilmember Metzke on his interpretation of what the council did. Did we lose him? Oh,
Well, I'm getting, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you?
yes.
Well, I didn't hear all of the city administrator's statements because I've got some spotty coverage where I'm currently at. But the 2/3, I would say, is a worst case scenario that we were looking at. That's with projections where they currently are. Of course, we don't know what the future would hold, but I don't know if you talked about that. Was a major talked about the prioritizing was the zone of contention that we were talking about, and that we do need to have some type of priorities in case scenario is our reality. And with that, I know there's some whether or not we should have these overall arching priorities, which I will tell you personally, I did not think was a good idea. But within the projects and the scope of the projects, having some priorities within those to where you have the absolute pieces that really should be done right away and those that might be able to wait until a financial future looks a little bit more promising. So I'm not sure exactly if I'm agreeing with what the city administrator said in total, but that would be my take so far.
This is Audrey again. My concern was it was strictly like 2 sentences to stop all the architectural designs, and that's what we voted on. So I just was curious how you were feeling about that and what the next steps should be.
Well, I think I made the motion, and I think it was until the financial situation is reevaluated. I think it was the term. And so if the financial outlook is different than where it currently is, we can reevaluate moving into the architecture and having the architects even do certain aspects of the projects or whatever. But I think it was all tied to the financial situation.
Thank you.
Okay, couple things on that. I think, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention is in my conversations with the architects, I think, we can't just, I think, cut them off because they're there to, I think, help us work through this priority process and potentially do calculations for us, because we may have something that's really high priority, but it may be low in cost versus something low. It might be very high in cost. So we need to have our numbers. So I think the design part of continuing on really needs to just, kind of be put on hold. But that doesn't mean we're still not going to be talking to the architects on each one of the projects, because they need to help us through the process to fine tune this. And also give us maybe options that we thought, well, we got, let's say we had plenty of money. We want this particular material. Well, you can get the same thing with a lower price material, but we weren't interested in it. Well, now we are. So they are part of that discussion yet. They're just not putting ink on paper to actually draw it all out and create plans and specs.
Okay,
I would agree with that. I was just confirming I would agree with everything you just heard there.
Okay, couple things. Let me jump into this topic where I think we're going to spend some. Mary, go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm, was it both the architecture firms and the construction managers that were put on hold? I thought I only heard architects.
That may have been, I think, what was said, but the actual implementation is, if you don't have a project, you don't need a construction manager at this point in time. So we're using both the construction manager and the architect to work through the costing out of different items in a project. The architect is relying upon the construction manager to perform some of those functions. So we'll be working with both. But as far as actually preparing plans and specs, that's the architect's job. The construction manager makes sure it gets constructed. So from my perspective, we're still going to be relying on both of the entities to help us make decisions, but the architect is not authorized to continue drawing up plans and specs and or construction documents.
Okay, so I listened to the council meeting twice from Thursday night, and the thing that I got out of it was this, and I want to talk to this topic, and then I think we need to hear from everybody and maybe look at either, it can be information only tonight, but at some point we have to send what I believe the council wants, and that is a prioritization of the projects. And so one of the things that I want to bring up is this, because I've thought about this. If we prioritize the projects, what I want to hear from people on, do we want to reduce every project by 33%? Or do we want to prioritize our projects, and if we can't fully fund the last couple on the list, then that group that they go out and try to find a private partner or figure out a plan? Because I'm hearing different things on that. I'd like to hear from everybody. Do you want to cut 6 projects down to 67%, or do you want to try to fully fund all of them? And if we can't, if we only get to 20 million, then the last 10 million doesn't get funded, and prioritize those. I'm interested in hearing what people think of that, because I think we're gonna have to send that to the council, because I believe that's what they're looking for, a prioritization. But then, do we want to trim everything 33%, or we just want to fully, go ahead, Brian.
All right, so it's not to muddy the waters. I'm going to try and cut to this as clear as I believe the direction of the council was. Each committee was to identify their own priorities. Each committee was then to, in essence, come to a conclusion as to what their 67% was. Okay. And there also was intent, I think, on the city council to say that the city council is not going to dictate what each committee's priorities were, but that the committee had to make those decisions. Now, at some point, I guess the city council is going to, hear your priorities, but then they would, authorize the architects to continue and move on and get on with the show. There was discussion at the finance and a little bit at the city council meeting when we talk about being able to transfer, 10% of your project if you don't spend it to another project. So, it's my understanding, and the maker of the motion is here tonight, that it wasn't collectively as 30,000, drop it down to 20 and fund a collective 67%. It was my understanding it was a 67% of every committee, so that each project had a shot at getting 67% of their project, at least done in the first round. So Councilor Meske is here, and I think he can speak to that. But that was what I heard. But it also was an extension of the finance committee that happened the week before. So, and maybe a few of you, hadn't listened to that conversation, but I'm carrying that from what I heard at finance and at City Hall, and that's what my understanding is. So,
okay, that's good information. That's good information. What Mr. Muskie?
I would add the emphasis. Realized when we made the motion that we had now no contact with the local option sales tax group that we're currently meeting with. Therefore, the most equitable way to deal with some kind of a big economic hit was to just do it equal. However, I want to emphasize that a lot of the discussion was we need the feedback from this group and our subcommittees of what to do, because there was no appetite at the council, nor should there be, in my opinion, that we should be prioritizing these things and moving them around when the champions and the advocates for these groups are out there doing the work. It was the work of the first group that was approved, at least partially, because it was already had priorities listed, and it was easy to say, well, given the current financial situation, we'll do pavement at Robbins Island and maybe not the other pieces at that point. But if this group finds another way, we were looking for advice from this group. So how I believe you understand, when we were sitting in a position, we were saying that a 2/3 funding across the board was the most equitable way to make that suggestion there. But I want to emphasize, we were looking for feedback from this group as well as the subcommittees. And so if there's a better way to do it to hit that finances, I would be open to that.
Okay, Audrey, and then we'll go to Dennis after Audrey.
So once again, just to clarify, we had a lot of discussion about a lot of things, but I didn't think we had voted that we were requiring to go to 67%. I saw that as a suggestion, but also what I heard us vote was we can't afford to do this right now, and so we're just stopping. And so the question I have is, some projects need 100%, or some projects you just don't do them if you can't do them right. And so I don't know where I'm at. I don't know where the council's at, but I did not feel that we gave clear direction as to cut projects or those types of things. What I saw us doing was putting those projects on hold because we can't afford to do them right now, and looking for suggestions with how will we bring them back when we can bring them back. And so I'm still at a loss for what we actually did on Monday night with the motions, because what I heard us was just stop the architects and kind of go back to the drawing board. So I'm hopeful that we can work through it.
Okay, thank you, Audrey. Dennis?
I listened to the meeting too, and I'm going to back up just a little bit. I don't understand what the council's thinking is as far as why should we even move ahead until we have a better idea as to what the revenues are going to be. I mean, right now we're 8 months into collections, and we're going through an awful period, and we'll probably be in this period for another year or year and a half, depending on who you listen to. I guess I'm wondering if we should just put a pause on things rather than make the committees try to figure out what they can do with 67%. It seems like that's a premature judgment to me. And I'd like the council members to tell me how that sits with them.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, I think we all recognize that no matter what happens in the next 13 years, retail sales are not going to go to zero. And that obviously results in no projects. So we're taking, I think, what I would say a conservative expectation of what our sales tax will be. We're down into the, instead of $250,000 a month, which was the original optimistic projection, we're down into the $100,000 a month. And for the next, 12 to 18, 24 months, and then it picks back up. Hopefully the economy comes back and, retail sales rebounds from 50% back up to, 80, 90% for a few years, and then back to 100. So when you do that, you end up in year 13 right at around 210,000 a month, which then equates to roughly $24 million over the 13-year period. So I don't think it's a matter of we don't do nothing because we don't have sales tax. The question is, we anticipate getting about 2/3 of the sales tax. What do you want to do with that money? It's not down to zero unless the whole economy just falls apart and goes kablooey. So we know that's not going to happen. Even our financial advisors for our bonding said, you're being conservative, but it's not going to zero. We know that. So where is it? It's roughly in that 2/3 area. So, I don't see this as put everything on hold and quit and wait till the economy comes back. I see this as saying only commit to those projects that you can foresee as having the money available to do those projects. And that's where the 2/3 comes from.
Dennis?
I'm not totally familiar with the enabling legislation that set up the sales tax, but it seems to me it was 30 million or 13 years, whichever comes first. It would seem to me that if we got into this and we're 8 or 10 years down the road and it doesn't look like we're going to get to our 30 million, we could go to the legislature and ask for a change to allow us to keep collecting until we got to the $30 million. So I still don't see that the 30 million is gone forever.
I'll jump in and say, you are correct. The 30 million is not gone forever. What is your limiting factor is when we do these projects, we borrow the money up front. And the people that buy our bonds are going to look at what is your current sales tax. So we can't sell $30 million worth of bonds because we can't pay them off in 13 years. The sales tax revenue isn't there, and you can't force it to be there either. So what you can do though is you can sell $20 million worth of bonds, get what you can done, because that's a reasonable expectation for our sales tax revenue to pay off. And then, as Dennis points out, anywhere, 2 years from now, you could go to the legislature and say, we need 5 more years to do our projects. And then you bond for the other $10 million, and you have that additional time to pay that off. You don't have to wait till year 13 or 12 or 11. You can do that as soon as you can identify what your shortfall is. And doing our math, doing the estimations and calculations, we can pretty well identify what the shortfall is based on assumptions. But, we don't know if they're going to actually happen. I don't know what the inflation is going to be in year 10, but we built an inflation factor in. So we're close, but there's some unknowns. So I would say not this year, maybe not next year, but the year following, we'd be prepared to go to the legislature and say, we've done our calculation. We need 5 more years off of, to add to the 13 to make everything done. So that's where staff is at.
Okay, Mary.
I am no expert on the bonding part of the money, but I don't know where the 6 projects are in their beginning, middle, or end stage. Do we have to bond for all $20 million to right now for these projects? Can we say, I don't know where all of these projects are, but it doesn't really take a rocket science to figure out probably 3 of them, at least one of them is not even considered right now because it's attached to the city hall, and the city hall is put on hold. So that to me isn't even going to be in the realm of talking building, moving dirt in 2020, probably not 2021. Do we have to bond for their money at this time? Can we do it in chunks, or is there a disadvantage to asking for money or bonding for money in stages?
We would do stages is what we had originally. If we had done all the projects kind of at once, if everybody was, the easy projects were done in 2020, and then the rest of the projects would be going on in 2021, we would have done 2 bond issues. They would have totaled 30 if everything would have happened. But we didn't have to do 30 because some of it was stormwater, and we weren't necessarily going to do all that at once anyway. Okay, so you can take 7 off the top, so you're down to 23 million, and that would have been in 2 pieces. So I guess what I'm proposing right now is that in 2020 we will likely have a relatively small bond issue. It will be if done in time, will be the Swanson Field and the Robbins Island. So whatever those 2 things total, $4.3 million or something like that, let's say, that number is what we would bond for this year. And then as the other projects get developed and we need money for construction in 2021, we would then bond for those. And then if a project was delayed, let's say a $10 million project was delayed into 2022, that's when we would bond for that one. So we can bond as we need the money. So it doesn't have to be one big, and that's why I'm saying, that people who, let's say, buy the first $5 million bond are going to look at our sales tax and say, oh, sweet, you got double coverage. You could actually borrow $10 million. So we're really sure that you can pay this back. You're good. So then in 2021, when we decide to bond more, they're going to look at it and say, how much fluff do you have now? And can you pay back that bond issue? And we hope by then the economy will have started picking back up, and we won't be at the 100,000 a month. We'll be at the 150, 170, 180. Okay, so the revenue has to follow the debt, and if we don't have the revenue, we just can't sell the debt, which means the project can't be done. Does that help?
All right, thank you. John?
Yeah, okay, so from what I'm listening to it, do we want to go ahead and, sounds like the council wants us to prioritize a timeline on what we want to get done in the order we want to get that done? Is that what I'm hearing? And is that what we want our group to do, is pick out what projects we want to happen this year, next year, and the following year, and prioritize those? Is that what we should be doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're going into the area that I think that the council, what I got out of it is that they want us to prioritize. And I'll put this out there, and you guys can, then I'll stop, and then you guys can tell me what your thoughts are. But my opinion would be to not cut everything down 33%, because with the professional fees were already quite a bit lower than our budget. So my opinion would be, this would be the order that I would prioritize. And I'd be interested in hearing the other, everybody else's opinion. And at some point, I think we need to make a motion, whether it's tonight or whenever, I don't know, and send that so the council has that on file and on record. I believe they want to prioritize. I believe Robbins Island should be 1. I believe Swanson should be 2. I believe the fields 3, the outdoor rink 4, stormwater, community center, and the event center. And I put the event center last because we're gonna need some time on that. We might need a private partner to come in and help fund it. It's indoor space, and it's going to be the most expensive to build, operate, and staff. That's almost 10 million right there. So my order of prioritizing this is Robbins Island, Swanson, Fields, outdoor rink, storm, community center, event center. And I don't want to, my opinion is I don't want to cut 67%, 33% down, because I think we're going to have problems with all the projects at that point, because we're already taking them down about that much with professional fees. Feedback.
What if we had like the rec fields and the event center try to combine their, because we have a bubble and we have our event center. What
Okay.
would be the idea of trying to combine those to be able to do those together into one facility?
That's on the agenda, and you and Tony are going to talk about that in a little bit, but let's just stay on the prioritizing part here.
Good afternoon.
That's my priority list. Does anybody else have a priority list, or is that in the game? Does anybody want to speak to the priority list? That's what I believe they want. Tony.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think that makes sense. I think we all know we cannot spend money that we don't have. And I think all the subcommittees are probably at a point where they can list line item their projects in the order they want them with associated costs. And then we can look at those costs and forward what's doable in the appropriate amount of time, along with then our general priority list for all the committees to kind of move forward on that.
Matt, this is Bob. I don't like the idea of reducing all the projects by a third. I think whatever we do, we need to stick to our original plan of doing it the best possible way. And if it takes a little bit longer to do them all the right way, I'd be for that rather than try and get all of them done as quickly and not be satisfied with any of them.
Thank you. The bubble, the community center, the event center, they're indoor spaces. And I would like to, if we can't extend the years, that we then try to find a private partner to fund those. Those are not going away. They're still a priority, but they're more complicated and expensive. And that's my opinion on, I don't want to add to the city council in the near future, overhead operation costs that they'd have to incur. Dennis.
Yeah, your priorities, I think, are good. I'm a little uncomfortable not knowing exactly the scope and what some of those other projects are going to incorporate. I have a question. I was encouraged, but what Brian said about bonding, early bonding of $5 million. So that would indicate that perhaps the council will be willing to hear plans and specs for Swanson Field. And I think that was talked about on Monday night, but I didn't understand that they were going to do that. And I would heartily agree that we should do Swanson Field this year if possible.
So I think Dennis, the next step would be as soon as that committee's ready, then Mary brings it to us, we review, and then we try to move it along. And then at that point, the council has to decide if they're comfortable bonding. And that's still very possible, is my understanding. Brian?
Yeah, as soon as we have a number for our projects, we'll go ahead with the bonding. So we just need to have a number.
Have we reached out to the, like, Representative Baker, Senator Lang? Do we know the appetite, or can we ask them the appetite because of the extenuating circumstances of the COVID? Can we get, or would they allow extension of the sales tax?
We've had some preliminary discussions or communications, and I think all we can really take from it, because it's the entire legislature that makes that decision, is that originally the other communities that wanted local option sales tax this year were taken off the table, and they were put back on, I think, 2 weeks later, because the legislature said those citizens asked for this to be placed in their communities. We're not going to, i.e., deny them that ability just because the times are tough. If they want to carry it forward, they'll do it. So I believe, I don't know where it is in the process, but they didn't shut down local option sales tax this year in the legislature. So that gives me a positive feeling that they're saying, if your community wants to do this, we'll let you do it. Okay. So, and then I think, I believe I had Finance Director Okins make a call to Mr. Baker, and the response was, when you're ready, we'll talk. Well, we're not ready. We don't know 3 years or 5 years, and we don't know how much we're going to be short. So it's a little premature to sit there and ask for something that, as soon as they say, well, how long? I don't know, So as soon as we have concrete numbers, we'll initiate that conversation more seriously.
What they did, Tony, this year is you had to go to the legislature before you went to the public, and they shut 21 of them down before they even went to a vote. So they didn't even go to a vote. They're not going to go to a vote in November. Mary?
Well, and I was just going to say, when we went to legislature, Diane Loeffler was the chair of that committee, and Diane Loeffler unfortunately passed away 5 months ago. So as we all know, every 2 years, the legislature may or may not turn over. So, what we can investigate right now is all, I would say, premature to talk about, Mike is saying that, or Brian is saying that we don't know what we're asking for yet because we're not out of this situation. So how do we know what to ask for the legislature? I think that's a good tool in the toolbox for the future. But is it time that maybe we just going to see how far along some of these projects are and have that discussion, because maybe that might become a little bit clearer to everybody on this call to say, we may not be talking about being prepared for this fall or next year with these projects, or is that too premature yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I'm not sure on that, Mary. My next question would be, does this group want to take tonight as informational, or do we want to formally send a prioritization list to the council that what we want and recommend? Do you guys want to do that tonight, or do you want to hold on that? Because I'm ready to go to the next topic unless we're going to take action on the priority list.
Matt, my question would be about the stormwater and the community center. If, as far as priority, like how far down the road is the City Hall Community Center? How far down the road is that as far as a priority for the city? I mean, is that something that, have they decided how long they're going to push that out? Or Brian, do you have any idea on that? And then the stormwater, is that a phased in increment by increment project that goes over years? Or is that something that they just, in 2022, we are going to do this $7 million stormwater project? So I guess that's a question that I have when we prioritize those two items.
Well, I mean, I'll let Brian speak, but I do think, John, basically it's just kind of a year by year or a month by month, see how things play out. But if this community center and the event center were on the end of the priority list, we're within the 20 million. Whether the council wants to fund that, if and when, I think that's up in the air. Brian?
Yeah, the stormwater part was kind of as needed. It was almost like a fill-in. My belief is that, potentially you could, sell a smaller bond somewhere in the middle of the 13 years to do stormwater. But more than likely what was going to happen was you were going to collect your local option sales tax revenue. And if you had $700,000 more than you needed to pay, the next year's debt, you had $700,000 that you potentially could do some stormwater projects, so almost like operating off of reserves without paying the debt for a bond kind of a thing. You're paying cash for it. So that was the ebb and flow part. I think the city council's decision on the community center, because the two are tied together at this point as a project, that they did place the architect on the City Hall Community Center, on hold also. That's a little bit tougher one because it's not sales tax supported except for 20%. The other 80% of it is local property taxes, and the council has to make a decision. Is just give you a thumbnail perspective. $8.5 million worth of debt for the city hall portion amounts to about $810,000 in debt service, which amounts to about a 13.5% increase in property taxes. So the city council could say, well, we're going to use some reserves and it's only going to be a 7% increase in property taxes. You know, how are the citizens going to accept that, having just gone through COVID-19 and stores shut down and people losing their jobs? And so that's a decision the council has to make. So I don't know that there's a timeline that they're, going to bring this back. I think they're going to let the dust settle. It could be 2-3 years before they come back. That I don't know, but that's their decision, subject to them bringing it back, unless Councilor Nelson or Muskie have comments on that.
I will make one comment. I think both of those are really politically charged pieces. I think for stormwater, the citizens are really attuned to that when there is an issue, but I don't think we'll ever eliminate that issue for the city of Willmar. But when you're making progress towards it, that is what people are looking for. So I could see slipping pieces of that in different bonding issues to show that you're still making progress towards mitigating flooding. The community center, that one is, as I think Brian pointed that one out pretty well, it's a big one that's going to sit out there for, I would foresee it sitting out there for at least a couple of years for sure. But can I just ask if I've got a right pulse here? Am I hearing that the priority listing you have is based on more or less those things that don't add to the overhead costs of the city, which I very much appreciate? But are you recommending that we would fund them at the actual limits that were set, and not having any kind of prioritizing within the projects themselves?
So my thought, and if we get to a motion today, would be that we'd fully fund them and then not do the 67% of it, just we'd fully fund those. But then I would want those committees to prioritize that stuff because within there, and then they can pull out alternates. Like example would be if Mary has 2 million for Swanson and her stuff comes in at 2.5, then she's got to cut 500,000. So the committees would prioritize within their alternates, and then but yeah, I think we should. My opinion is we should fully fund, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to take another 33% off the projects. And I go back to the community center and the event center. I go back to those are more complicated. They're going to take longer, and hopefully we can find funding. But if we put those up front, that's going to knock a lot of stuff out. We're going to have to take out. So my goal is at some point it's not going to be possible to keep everybody happy. The rec center, the event center was my number one thing. The one that passed, Dennis could remind you that I tried to get it on that didn't pass 4 years ago. But I think that one would be the one that we would keep us within 20 million. If that's what happens, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm optimistic. I actually think we're going to get the 30 million. I believe we're going to get it through extending this or through a private partner. I think it's going to happen. But to me, if we didn't, that would be the one where we would be able to fund all the other ones. Audrey.
Just a question with what we're trying to accomplish tonight. If the goal is to bring Swanson Field forward at some point in time yet this year, then perhaps we should focus on that. I don't feel like I'm ready to prioritize other projects. I don't know enough about them. Plus, I think the way you listed them was somewhat different than the way they're on the sheet too. I think we need to learn more about those, but if we're going to talk about Swanson Fields, what has to happen in order to take it back to the council to reconsider doing Swanson Fields this year?
Well,
that's my question. And I think we're not going to have time to do justice to all of the projects tonight.
Swanson's on the agenda to get an update from Mary. So, I mean, we're not there yet. I guess my message that I received from the council, they want us to prioritize the projects. So I would like to do that tonight. If others do not want to do that tonight, we can wait. Sean.
I would say if you want a chance that Swanson Field will get on an issue, you're going to need to prioritize them tonight if you want this to
Yeah.
move forward in a timely fashion, because that is precisely what the council would be looking for. And whatever rationale you use, I'm going to forward and advocate for it. That's why we're having the meeting is, and as Audrey said, we didn't have enough information to prioritize them ourselves. But if this committee puts them in a prioritizing list, and you have a rationale for doing it, and you think those two projects, Robbins Island and Swanson, can go forward right now, that will be something the council will be looking for.
Well,
Can
the
I just
other-
clarify?
Yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
I'm just clarifying that Swanson Field, I was assuming was our first priority. The rest of it to me can wait. If we make the assumption that a Swanson Field is our next priority, then do we really have to deal with all the other projects tonight until we hear from them? That's more where what I was trying to say.
The reason I think we need to do that because it ties into the 33% reduction. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that if we had a very concise overview of where these projects are at right now, I think it will be crystal clear what we can bring to the city council. But maybe I'm wrong. So I would like to see if we could do a quick review and just let our two council members know for sure where we're at, and maybe they will understand better the progress of each of these committees, because you're right, we have not had updates.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I guess, when I was writing down your priorities, I ended up with 7, and I know there's only 6 projects. And this is kind of stemming from what Councilor Nelson mentioned too. And that is,
Okay.
The outdoor rink is listed in there as number 4, but technically it's part of the event center. Am I not correct?
That is
Correct.
under that committee, correct, yes.
Yeah. So I guess whatever priority you want to set, that's fine, but I would try not to pick out specific things and move them around, because there's other people probably on the event center committee that would say, well, mine is just as important as that is. So that committee needs to decide what they bring forward, to you guys, I would think. But that's your decision. But I'm just saying, it just seemed like that one stuck out as it was a outlier. It wasn't part of its original package.
Yeah, I mean, that is a fair point, and I understand that, but it's 1.5 million versus the 8.5 of the event center. So you're looking at, I'm trying to stay under 20 million to get to that point. So it certainly, it drew a lot of votes, just like the turf did. It was, yes, it's underneath the umbrella of the event center, but it's a separate piece of that.
Brian, I agree. I understand where you're going with that. The one thing that we could consider, and you're right, the rec center has to be the one that brings that forward. But also knowing that it is an outside thing rather than a building inside. And I think that's what, Matt, you were talking about before, right?
Well, I'm trying to focus on the stuff that doesn't add overhead, staffing, utilities for the most part. That's outdoor stuff, and that would fit in to that. But I mean, as far as it's either the outdoor rink or the event center. If we put the event center up at number 4, then it gets more complicated, Brian.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because the event center is a complicated project, that it all has to fit together. And if you just say, well, we're not going to worry about the bathrooms, we're not going to worry about all these other things, but we're going to have the outdoor rink, when it comes time to actually do the other things, they're saying, well, why did we put the outdoor rink there when it should have been over here? Now it's in the way. So it has to be part of a cohesive package in order to to lay those things out. At least that was my understanding when I was looking at the concepts of it, that they were moving
Yeah.
things around, saying, how does this fit here and how does that fit there? So it's part of a bigger relationship. And if the event center committee said, here's our priorities, and number one is the hockey thing, and we want you to fund that, I'm all good for that, because they made that decision, not, I didn't make that decision. And I think that's what Councilor Miskey was kind of saying at the council meeting, was let the committees make that decision, because they're the ones that fought for it, and they're the ones working with the architect, and they've had all this discussion about what's more important, or what do we want more than the other thing. I just pointed out as that's one thing that pops out at me, and so I'm done.
Sean.
Well, I think that's both are good points, actually. I think maybe the steering committee, I mean, that's what we are here. And if the recommendation is, when you go back to evaluate the prioritizing by each project, to say the projects that will not increase overhead will be looked at more favorably, I think you'll be providing the guidance to each of those subgroups, and it's being consistent. Just a thought as I'm listening here.
Dennis.
Brian said some of what I was saying, and I really think that we have to let the committees bring forth these ideas. I think it's confusing to everybody, including the council, if we start breaking the projects apart. And I'd like to keep it as easy and on task as we can. That said, if the event center committee says, put the ice rink in and we're good, then fine. I'm not comfortable pulling it out and making that recommendation.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, let's move to the next item. Let's go to an update on the rec center fields. Tony. Yep.
Matt, we're going to lose Brian here in a couple minutes, and I have a commitment at 5 o'clock too. I'm just wondering what we're trying to get done before we
I was
lose.
trying to get a priority list done, but we're not going to be able to do that. So the next step is an update from John and Tony, and then an update from Mary. Go ahead, Tony. Tony or John, if you guys could update us on what we're looking for. Is you guys were exploring the opportunity potentially to visit with the event center committee.
Right. Well, we've had some preliminary discussions with the situation that we're in with the building of two facilities, and there's been discussions on operational costs and how to go about streamlining our facilities and taking the bubble facility and the rec center event center facility and putting it into one combined facility. And we've talked with the rec center subcommittee about possibly sharing one facility and putting a rec field and the event center / rec center into one facility. We met with them last week and just gave an informational meeting, and we have another meeting set up for tomorrow to answer questions, more questions regarding how that could possibly happen. So Tony, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, we took this step because it's a way that we can get all of the amenities that we went to the voters with in November of 2018, but allow us to stay under budget. And also to kind of simplify that we're not double staffing with city staff, and still providing new opportunities for our citizens that are not available. Now, there will be some cost savings doing this, but it probably won't be to the 1/3 cut that we have talked about. But I think if we can postpone this, put it lower on the priority list as far as the rec center building, I think this is still something we can do. And both the rec fields and the rec center groups are very interested in pursuing this. And so we're very optimistic that we can provide some cost savings and yet still provide everything that we went to the voters with.
One thing that we're also looking at is that with a facility like this where you have the turf field and the rec center in one building, you're able to provide a lot of programming needs for Park and Rec, and also some revenue building where local towns could come in and rent the turf facility in the wintertime for be it soccer or baseball or softball. So we're also looking at the revenue side of that could possibly generate some more revenue than just having a rec center with the bubble. That's what we were hoping for, but knowing that the expenses of the bubble, operating costs, and the expenses of the rec center costs, we just know that that's in this time, especially going forward, is not feasible to do. And so we're looking at, like Tony said, to get all the things that we want. We're just going to have to try to combine them under one roof, and also be able to have Park and Rec programming in that facility, as well as outside rentals from groups and bigger events inside that building.
Audrey, Mary, do you guys have any questions? Bob, Dennis, that's just an area that they're exploring. Questions? Mary?
My only question is that okay to do, to have those two committees working together to come up with a combined project or a different project, period?
Right.
I think it's okay for the committees. It just gets messy when you've got two architects. And there seems to be a predisposition towards a particular type of building and a particular kind of provider, which then flies in the face of, the actual bidding process. So I guess at this point, it just gets more complicated. But can it be done? It probably can be. We'll have to work through it, and if items pop up, we'll just have to work through them and find out how we're going to get through it. But the first thing is, which one's going to be the lead architect? Because you're taking a product out of one contract, reducing the scope of that contract and also the income of that firm, and transferring it to the other one. Do you just cut it and say, this is no longer part of your project, and we're going to add it to the other one and increase the scope of that? That's contract law, and I would need the city attorney to weigh in on how that's supposed to work.
Mary?
That brings up a point that I've asked a couple of folks. Given this period of COVID pandemic, we've never lived through something like this. Do all these contracts stand as is, or is there any kind of, man, this was out of our control? And these contracts, meaning like the 24 months that we have, or whatever the time limits that we have on these contracts, are obviously going to be changed or could be changed. Are the contracts something that we can negotiate in a time of pandemic?
I think you can always discuss your contract, but the contract is something that's been signed. Now, the city council could say, we're canceling all the architect contracts. The architects would send us a bill for what they've done up to the date of that decision. We would be obligated to pay it, and then the contract would be null and void.
Audrey?
Just a question. I'm not sure how the decision was made to move together. Was it based off from just cost, or was it based off from a direction that you thought you were going to have to cut the projects to 67%? Or, I mean, I don't know how the two decided, and I know Councilmember Davis asked that question too. You know, she wasn't sure what to do because the groups were meeting together. And so I'm just curious with what brought them together, or why they thought they needed to go together versus stay separate.
John?
I could jump in, John. So two things, Audrey. One is both committees, both subcommittees were over budget. And we felt it was it's difficult to cut things, and we were going to leave things off that were really necessary. And you know, if we needed to cut a bubble, which has considerable expense, that's going to decrease potential revenue for the city, which makes these projects even more expensive. And then it doesn't fulfill our obligation to the voters that we went to them for. We realized that because of how the legislation was written and what was passed, we did approach the city attorney for an opinion prior to meeting. And his interpretation was that we could meet with them and discuss, and it is ultimately the subcommittee's decision if they want to continue that discussion further and combine budgets in order to preserve the overall integrity of our plans and the projects.
Right, and we in discussions just with you know, in our committees, we look to reach out and come up with this idea for cost savings, operational costs and things. And we reached out to Brian and Rob to get their opinion on what if this could be a possibility after talking to the city attorney, and just floating it out there and see, can we explore this? Can we have conversations? It wasn't a directive from anybody. It's just, you know, looking to save costs and offer everything that we've went to the voters for. We thought we have an obligation to try to pursue all avenues to maximize our money and that spending power that we had.
Matt, can I ask one more question?
Yep, go ahead, Audrey.
So, I mean, I was excited for the fields and those types of things from a marketing standpoint of being able to bring tourism here and the dollars that those dollars generate into the community. And so that's been, you know, I've been supportive of where we're going with how we're intended to use those facilities to be able to bring additional people into the community. So does the combining of the facilities, I guess the concern that I have is that we're not just doing that for our own school or for our own, you know, just, are we going to be able to bring people into this community to use the facilities to help us with the operational costs? And so that's a concern when I hear kind of what's being proposed is it something that's marketable to bring in people outside of the community?
I would say yes, Audrey. I think you know, with you know, with a facility of this size, it's like having a bubble, but also but it's 12 months a year. I think, you know, just from our discussions, you know, you could have your Rock and Robbins concerts in the wintertime. You know, you could have more shows because your event center is bigger. It's the turf and the event center together. So I think your facility is a lot bigger than what you would get with just a standalone rec center, event center. I think there's lots of possibilities and creative ways for programming and events to be in a facility of that size. I think it would be enhanced. Personally, I think it'd be enhanced what the possibilities that you could do of bringing things into our community with a facility of this magnitude.
One of the things that I would say to tack onto what John said. Sorry, Tony.
I would just echo what John said, and Audrey, I would say there would be no concerns. There'd still be 2 turf fields. one of the turf fields would be completely enclosed year round with, on the one end would be a concrete floor with 2 multi-use courts for pickleball, tennis, basketball, volleyball, an additional surface for indoor playground. There's options for a second floor if we want to put office space or anything. We would position that so we can attach it to the rec center if funding is available. If it's a rain day on the Rockin' Robins, we can move it all inside there. That space is big enough for that.
Brian.
Yeah, the response from the city attorney was, if you provide those things that you described in the legislation and in what you gave to the voters in order for them to vote, whether it be the actual ballot or your promotional materials, if you provide those things, it doesn't matter if it's yellow, green, blue, or red, as long as you provide those things. And if you provide something where you combine two things and it becomes a third item altogether, which was neither described nor put on paper, then you're going to run into difficulties. So I wasn't around when you did the promotion, but you know, I'm just going to throw out just a simple concept. If you promised an inflatable dome and you put up a 12-season hard-walled building, even though you're providing the same things within it that you said you were providing to the community, that really is, they aren't the same thing. Inflatable dome you take down, you put up, blah blah blah. Hard wall is totally different, even though you're providing the same activities within it. So those are the discussions and decisions that have to be made, is when you do something jointly, do you cross the line of providing something that is a third type of item, which is neither A nor B, but it's actually something new, and it's C, you know? And so that discussion has to happen, I think. And that's why I say, when I mention it to everyone, that yes, go ahead and have your discussions, but when you get to the point of coming to some conclusions, we have to run this up the flagpole, because we have to actually, you know, sell the bonds on some of this stuff, because the bond, you know, buyers are going to want to know that it's going for what we said it was going to be used for. So that's my only concern, is that we follow that guidance from our city attorney.
Matt?
Yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
Okay, something that Brian said triggered just a thought with me, and I don't know this, but it's a question. And I think there were questions about what was going to be in the event center versus what was going to be in the community center back when, you know, when things were, and so things have sort of sorted out with what the community center thinks they're going to do, based, in my mind, based off from some of the things that they thought might be going on in the event center. So is that a discussion that needs to take place then, with how will we be, I mean, what population are we serving in the new type of facility you're proposing, and what might we be doing in the community center? So Brian made the comment about 1 and 2, you know, now creating 3. And I guess that's a question for me, is it, whatever we're doing, does it change the concept of who's gonna be able to use the facility when, and does that affect the community center?
Well, my comments on that is from 7 to 3, probably seniors; from 3 to 6, probably after school; from 6 to 10, probably adults and older kids. But I don't think you're bringing up a bad point, but unfortunately with COVID-19, we're gonna have plenty of time for that conversation. Let's go to Swanson Field. Mary.
All right, so we are just days away of having the last I dotted as far as getting figures in, and the biggest thing was, how much does it cost to drain for good drainage out at Swanson Fields. So this is what we worked on. Orange would be the primary field. It would have a turf infield, stadium for 200 seats, drainage, dugouts, fencing needs to be adjusted, concession stand, batting cage. Blue, which is right now a skin infield, change that into a grass infield, improve the drainage, adjust the fencing, dugouts, batting cages. Softball, improve the drainage. All of it needs to have updated, better agrolime that's not, agrolime dugouts. We have the brown shed out there that has the existing two restrooms. Have a much improved upgrade to that building with storage. It holds the lights, it holds the irrigation water system, so that building has to remain there somehow, but we would add, looking at restrooms to the north of that brown shed. Parts of also the project is to have a shelter out by the softball fields with a small playground. We are days away from actually being able to make I guess, a virtual meeting for public to weigh in on what we have decided. And then coming to the Invest in Willmar board and go up the ladder. So I see this as just a step behind Robbins Island. Audrey?
Mr. Graham, it's just a question. Is Swanson Fields okay with proceeding with this or do we have to go back to the council to approve any proceeding with it?
I would anticipate if tonight there's a decision of making Swanson Field the next priority item, and because there's enough funding available, that this discussion should culminate in a decision that no matter what happens with the rest of them, Swanson Field is next, and we recommend that it be authorized to continue to plans and specs stage, finalized. Then I would say Mary be able to continue on and do the public display of what their project is, and then fine tune it from there and go on. But what I heard the council say was everything's on delay, and it only comes off a delay by council action. So in 2 weeks from Monday night, we'll have another council meeting. And so if this committee can make a decision to recommend to the council that they release Swanson Field from the hold and allow it to proceed, then we're on our way. But I think it does take council action.
Can we make a motion then to do that, Matt? You're not on, Matt. Your mic is not on.
Sorry, Mary, go ahead. Mary, then Dennis.
Maybe this is a little bit premature, but should I ask to be on the agenda for the next council meeting?
Well, I guess, Mary, do you think that you guys got to come to us first, right? It comes to us, Park and Rec, then council,
I'm not
correct?
saying just even to be able to explain it so that they can get it off of not moving forward project. Would it be helpful to have somebody from the committee there or virtually present to answer any questions in case they have a question? So I'm asking, should I recommend to be on the agenda, or could you talk to me during the council meeting if you had a question?
At this point, I don't see a need for that. I think what we need is a vote that's in the minutes that reflects that the next project that this committee wants to have done is the Swanson Field, and that they recommend the city council allow it to continue to go through the process get to plans and specs, and then it comes back to through the process, the committees, and gets back to the city council with the plans and specs and authorization to bid. Okay, I think the council's made it pretty clear. The committee invest in Willmar, let you guys decide what the project is. Bring it up to us when you're done. So that'd be my take on it. They don't necessarily want to see its details now. They just want to know that this group says they're next and we want that done.
Okay, Dennis?
I'll make a motion that we move Swanson Field ahead.
Second.
Dennis got the motion to move Swanson Field ahead when plans and specs are ready, and I guess any discussion?
I would also add that
Second.
the motion should also include at full funding if that is your intent.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's my intent, but I don't know
Yes.
if other people want to fully fund, or do we want to do the 67%? That's a great question you just brought up.
Well, but
Dennis?
that has to be part of the motion, so that when it gets to the council, they know they're approving this project at this funding level. Go ahead.
I want to just spend 1 second on the 10%. And my understanding is there's a lot of conversation on this 10%, but it's probably going to be hard for every project to finish right on the dollar amount. So my understanding is if there's $75 or $75,000 left over, it goes to the next project. I don't think anybody's looking to give or take 10%. And that's how I see that. So I don't know why we're having a lot of conversation in the past about the 10%. So Dennis, do you want to fully fund this, or is that your intent? Up to their budget?
I guess we have to put it in there, and yes, that would be my intent, that it's fully funded. But having said that, I think that we would maybe look for some options coming from that committee as well. But my intent is it's funded at 100%.
So Matt, this is Bob. I'm wondering if we need to address the 67 or 68%, and maybe we could state it saying the total of the 6 projects, we're understanding we need to set that in the 67 or 68% budget. But we do want to start with the first 2 at 100%, and if dollars are not available, then we prioritize the others accordingly.
I agree with that. I don't know exactly how to address that, but I agree with everything Bob just said, Brian. If that's a separate, should that just be our opinion and sent to the council, or is that like another motion? Because I think everybody's on the same page. It was my understanding everybody's on the same page. We do not want to cut down to 67% per project. What's your?
Then I would carry that as part of the motion, so that's the recommendation of city council to release Swanson Field at the $2 million allocation project cost, and that any shortfalls will be made up in the remainder of the projects yet to be determined.
Okay. Any further discussion? Motion is to fully fund Swanson. It's been seconded. Any other questions?
This is Audrey. And I'm gonna have to leave in a minute, but I don't want to cumber this, but do we have to add that? I mean, we didn't agree on the shortfall. I mean, we agreed to wait on those. So, and I think we all kind of had the feeling that we either need to do it right or not do it. So does that 67% thing need to be that we're expecting the rest of the projects just to pick up the shortfall? Is that what we're saying?
I guess, I think we need to let the council know what our intentions are, and I would say that that is what we're saying. Otherwise, I think you're gonna,
Okay, just clarify for me. So you're accepting the fact that we're going to allow the rest of the projects to not be fully funded? Is that what you're saying?
well, we don't know that yet. I mean, because we don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
So we
Then
don't
why do we
know
have
if
to
we're,
add that in there? Why do we have to have that last part in there then? Why don't we just say we're gonna fully fund the Swanson Field project? Why do we have to address that next piece down the road?
This is Bob.
well, I think that's what I think the council, I think, is operating under that idea. No?
I heard that as one option of reality, that we can't get to 30 million. But what
Okay.
I'm also hearing is we may have to look at extending or reaching outside. So not reaching 30 million is different than cutting the projects to me. So I'm a little concerned with the expectation that we're gonna cut the rest of the projects to meet the funds versus prioritize and maybe not fund all the projects, only fund what we can at 100%.
Well,
Did
I
I
mean,
say that makes sense?
the goal is to fully fund everything. We just don't know exactly how that's going to play out. So Brian had to go. I want to get this at least approved. Or no, you just moved. Sorry, Brian. Mary, do you have a question?
Nope.
Oh, thought you had your hand up. So I guess the
Will
motion on the
somebody
table.
just repeat the motion that you're asking us to vote on?
Yeah, Brian, do you have it written down or no?
No, I don't have it wrote down. Janelle should have it wrote down if anybody does, but I think the recap is to recommend to the city council to authorize Swanson Field project to continue working with the architect to complete the plans and specifications, and which would result in going out to bid in 2020 at the full allocation that was authorized by the citizens and in the enacting legislation, which was $2 million. The city council is well aware that it's like a balloon. You squeeze here, it's going to pop out over there. So if you're going to fund this one, given the limited amount of monies we have, something is going to have to be delayed, not cut, but possibly delayed.
So if this committee right now says, yeah, we accept that responsibility, that's the answer?
Yep. If you remember, if you heard what Councilor Meskis, basically was said, he said, the council could have mandated 67% on every project.
Yep.
But they really didn't. What they really mandated was, we only have 67% of the money available. You as a committee have to decide what you're going to fund, how much is appropriate for each one of the projects. And if you end up only funding, let's say, the event center at half or not at all, that's your decision. You guys are the leaders of what you send back to the city council. So if this is what you want to do, then take the vote and you'll move it on to the city council at the next meeting.
So Matt, my idea of addressing the 67%
Okay.
was,
Any other questions or comments?
yeah, Matt, this is Bob. My idea on addressing the 67% was just so that the city council would not say, okay, if we want 100% on these two projects up front, what's going to happen after that? So I think we need to communicate we're willing to stay within that 67% for all of the projects, or we want you to fund 100, the two at the top at 100%, and we'll sort out the shortfall on the others. But what we don't want for them to do is say, we don't know that we can fund these at 100% until we get more information from the committees.
I think that's a really good point. John? Oh, I thought, okay, so let's do a roll call. Tony Ammon,
Aye.
John Conold,
Aye.
Mary Swatsky,
Aye.
Bob Paul,
Aye.
Dennis Anderson,
Aye.
Audrey Nelson,
I still don't know if I understand the motion, but I'm in favor of moving Swanson Field forward, so aye.
okay. And Sean's gone. So what I think we should do is, that motion passes. So what I think we need to do separately is, I think what we should do, if we can make a real quick motion that we want to fully fund the projects. If not, what percentage? Let's fully fund the projects. Is that everybody's intent?
Matt,
can we make a
this is Barb. Matt,
Yep.
you have to understand that the council's action was to not fully fund Robbins Island as well. So if you want Robbins Island fully funded, you're going to have to make that as a motion as well, because the council cut Robbins Island just as a procedural issue.
Matt,
Yes.
I don't see that that was a procedural issue. That was a direct motion from Julie Osmus to do it without the shelters. So I don't think it fits into the same projects, the same method of calculating projects. I don't understand that particular one, but I see that as a different subject than moving forward.
Okay.
Matt, what I was saying is that you said you wanted to fund Robbins Island at 100%, and that you wanted to fund Swanson at 100%. What the council did was they lowered the amount on Robbins Island. If you want to put Robbins Island at 100%, the procedure of this committee, not of the council, but of this committee, would be to recommend that to go back to 100%. You certainly do not need to do that. It's just that your conversation, I've been listening to your whole conversation. Your conversation has been that you wanted to fund the projects at 100%. If that's not the intent of this committee, then that's fine, but I think you need to provide that direction as well.
Okay. No. Okay, well, I think we got to leave Robbins Island alone for right now. Brian, are you?
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I know that the comment was made and Robin Island was thrown in there at 100%. But for me, that decision's already been made by the city council. That's,
Okay.
they actually put on hold all the other projects. They didn't put on hold Robbins Island. And so what we're really talking about is bringing back the other projects in some recommended sequence so that the council can say yay, nay on it. So it might have been a slip of the tongue, but that's like water over the dam already.
Okay. Okay.
So Matt, you know what? It's 5:05. Brian didn't get in on his meeting. I think Audrey has to leave. Do we need to have another meeting, or are we soon?
June 10th is the next. June 10th is the next meeting that's on the schedule. June 10th at 4 o'clock. That is the next scheduled meeting. If somebody feels that they want to make it has a couple agenda items, then send something over. What, Dennis?
I'm just concerned about bringing the Swanson Field projects forward to us. I mean, that's a month away. You know, we've got a really cumbersome and time-consuming process. if they don't come to us until June 10th, it's going to be August something or other before it gets bid, may not even get constructed this year. I want to be aware of timing. And if Mary could have her stuff done in 2 weeks, it might behoove us to have a meeting to just discuss the Robbins Island plans and specs.
And I'm not opposed to adding a meeting if they're ready. Go ahead, Dennis, Brian.
Yeah, I'm going to just step in and say we understood that this project was not going to make the spring of 2020. And as we went through the architectural phase, they laid out a timetable, and we've got public meetings that we've got to go through before we hit final plans and specs. And it was my understanding that this was a fall construction project. Anyway, maybe Mary can focus this, but I've not been following every project, but it was going to be a fall project. And if it bled over into the spring of next year, you know, that's just the way life is. So I'm not concerned about bidding in August, but it needs to take its normal process to go through for review of the citizens, and the committee then can readjust, and the architect will redesign, and then finally plans and specs are done. That just has to happen on its own time frame. And
Yeah.
that's just the way life is.
Okay, Mary?
I agree with that. I also agree, I do recall, I believe Park and Rec Board could, had said that they could rearrange another time meeting in case, or another meeting in case the timeline is off, because everybody just meets once a month or whatever their schedule is. Given that we have COVID, is this an opportunity that it's easier to work, do all this kind of stuff? Not more quickly, but virtually. I get we need to go to the community, all of that. We may not be ready, like you say, Brian, any quicker than waiting another month, but it would be an opportune time. I do want to say that if there are no youth activities going on, if all the parks and fields are shut down, would it behoove us to sort of try to find a way to do something this year, early fall, into the fall, on those fields, and actually maximize some more time that we didn't think that we had.
Yeah, if you follow the Robbins Island, we moved meetings ahead. We brought in Park and Rec. We had 2 meetings on the same night to keep this thing moving as fast as we can. We'll do whatever we need to do to have meetings, not a problem. We want to keep it moving, but I just point out that this process has a timeline, and anything we can do to speed it up, we'll try.
Does that work, Dennis? Are you good with that?
Yes, no problem whatsoever.
Okay, so the next scheduled meeting is June 10th at 4, but obviously if there's reasons to get together, or there's some items that we want to address before that, the individual just has to send out a request to get together. And so it appears that Wednesdays usually work good for people. So
We
that's
do
all
need to formalize a letter though to the city council with our priorities. Is that correct? And I would prefer to have it written down and shared amongst this committee before actually getting into the hands of the city council members.
Well, the next meeting, what I could probably do is a recap of what I put together. And if the event center committee wanted to endorse the rink or something else under their umbrella to put in, so they are represented, then I will probably come back with that and say, okay, this is representative from the event center committee. They want to put this in, and then I'll come back to that, because I think it was favorable, other than the fact that the rink wasn't endorsed by that event center committee. And then I think we go to the council, Mary, June 10th with, this is our priority list.
What's the next? No, but the June
Well,
10th is a Wednesday. City council doesn't meet on a Wednesday.
But they don't need our priority list in the next week or two. They know Swanson's the next one. I mean, we're not going to do anything major between now and June 10th other than Swanson's the focus, right? I mean, there's not, I don't think we need to rush the. So my thought would be is I'll do a recap of that. And either the event center is going to say, yeah, put the outdoor rink in for 1.5 million or 1 million, or they're going to say no and put something in for 1 to 1 or whatever they want. Then we'll revisit the priority list. Is kind of what I think. I think we're close on that. So,
Matt, what I would suggest is that we just get a simple. We'll have the minutes, but we'll put an issue sheet together that basically just says that the Invest in Willmar committee has decided to move forward and recommends funding the Swanson Field project at full, and we'll put it on the agenda for June 1. Your actual prioritization of the remainder of the projects, that can take as long as you want to take. But I think we do want to get the city council to release the architects to continue performing their duties under the contract to fulfill the design. So June 1, we can take something to the city council to release Swanson Field, and all the rest can, like you said, that can be done 2 weeks later or whenever. But
as long as we're fresh on the priority list, think about it. Everybody can process it. As long as it's fresh and we brought it, well, let's at least, like you said, there's no rush, but let's try to get that so it's we've got it locked in, and so we can stay with that and stay on task and refer to it. So that sounds good, Brian. Anybody else? I would entertain a motion.
So that meeting will be the 10th of June, 4 o'clock.
That's our regular scheduled meeting. That is, yeah.
Okay. Unless we, okay, got it.
If we go before that, we go before that, but let's keep that one on the schedule. Somebody has agenda items they want to meet before that. Let's plan on it. When is Brian still on or no? Hopefully next time we can meet in person maybe. Anybody else? Otherwise I'd entertain a motion to adjourn if anybody's left.
Second.
Appreciate it, everybody. Have a good night.